And he said, there is far more life in the universe than you possibly know.
Hi, everybody. This is Maureen from Spirit Travels, and today we have another guest. Today is John, and he has this incredibly detailed account of the afterlife and heaven and all these really cool elements. I'm going to let him tell you his experience and talk about his account, and we'll ask him some questions towards the end. So, John, thank you so much for coming on here, and you can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, Maureen, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for inviting me on your show. It's such a thrill for me to be able to share my story because it's changed my life. It's given me so much hope for the future. I know that when I share it with audiences like yours, it helps people too. So thank you for inviting me on your show.
Thank you so much.
My story happened back in 1987 when I was 21. And something I always like to tell people is, even though it happened so many years ago, I think this has to be from God because I don't know any other way to explain it. But I remember every single detail of my experience like it happened yesterday. So that's why I'm able to share it with so much detail and so much recall. So my dad had won a couple of mopeds from a sales contest. Mopeds are like scooters, we would call them now. And we used to ride them every weekend. So one day I was out riding one and I had an accident and I crashed into a tree and I tore the tendons off my right hand. So I needed to go in for surgery to have them reattached. Well, I'd never had surgery before. I had never really had much experience even being in a hospital. So the day the surgery comes, I go in, they wheel me in, and they start to give me the anesthesia. And I had an allergic reaction, and my heart stopped. And I was officially dead for 7 minutes. And that's where this whole thing's happened for me, is after I died. And I woke up. When I opened up my eyes, I was standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. It was this long white marble, kind of like polished marble building. It went so far down that I couldn't see the end of it. And the first thing I said to myself was, oh my God, this hospital is so much bigger than I thought it was. Because I didn't know what was going on. So I'm standing in this building, and in my left ear, I hear, my name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide. And I think probably a lot of your audience knows this, but at the time, I didn't know anything about spirituality. I was raised a Catholic, so I was very skeptical about anything that I didn't have direct experience with. Well, we all have spirit guides, and the spirit guides help us plan our lifetimes, and they are with us as we continue with our life on Earth. So I just want your audience to know that my spirit guide's name was Alan, and he took me to all these different things on this part of the other side. And everything I'm able to relate with audiences is what he was telling me in my left ear. So everything that I saw, he took me to. So I'm in this building, and on my right-hand side, there are these beautiful white, maybe 20 or 30 feet marble columns. And they're all the way down. As far as you can see, they're about 6 feet apart. In the middle of this building are these marble square tables, and they have 4 seats around each end of the table. And there are 2 people sitting at these tables. And what these people are, they're called orientation counselors. And I'll get to more detail about that in just a second. And to the left of these tables were these doorways or corridors. They were solid. They looked like just blackness. Again, these doorways were all the way down this corridor, and they were right in front of these tables. So when you came through these tunnels, you were at these tables. And something I want to mention that I think will help clarify for your audience. You know how a lot of people, when they have a near-death experience, they they tell a similar story, that they're out of their bodies. They're either in a hospital or they're at some scene, some accident scene where they all of a sudden become aware of their bodies. They're looking down, they see themselves. Then they see a tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel is a white light. What normally happens is they're greeted by somebody like their guide or a loved one, a sibling, somebody who passed before them, who tells them it's not your time, you have to go back. So we've never heard what happens when someone goes into the light. And the reason is, when you go into the light, that lifetime is finished and you can't come back. Well, somehow, with my experience, I bypassed that, seeing your body, going to the tunnel, going to the white light, and they put me on the other side of the white light. And I think the reason was for that, so that I would tell people what it is that happens when you cross into the light. So these tunnels that were on the left-hand side of this corridor, these are the tunnels that we use to come from a lifetime on Earth back to the other side. And I don't know how the structure of that works. I just know that I don't know if they're wormholes, or I don't even know what you would call them. They're just these tunnels. And here's one of the most extraordinary parts of this. As Alan was talking to me, he was telling me what to do. So he told me to look up at the next tunnel. So I looked up at the tunnel, and there was a man coming through. He was an elderly gentleman, probably in his 80s or 90s, and he was holding his chest like he was in pain. And my guide said he just died from a heart attack. So I watched this whole process, and the woman, there was a girl or a woman, the orientation counselor, sitting there. She stood up. It was like she was waiting for him to show up. And I don't know how that works. I don't know how they know who's coming through and when. They just know somehow. So she stood up, she walked over, she took his hands in hers, and she led him back over to the table, and they sat down. And I could see that she was talking to him, but I was too far away to hear what she was saying. So I don't know exactly what she was saying, but here's a fascinating part about this. The reason that this orientation center is even there in the first place is because when we come into a lifetime, somehow, and I guess this is a God thing, I don't know other way to explain it, but we have amnesia about where we're really from. We're from the other side, or heaven, or the afterlife. That's home. Earth isn't home. It's not where we live for eternity. The other side is. So when we come into a lifetime, we have amnesia about where we're from. So these orientation counselors, their whole job is to help people remember where they're from. So as she was talking to him and explaining this to him, you just came back from a lifetime on Earth, you're back on the other side. And my guide told me to watch him. So I started watching him. And all of a sudden, as he started to get his memory back again, what was going on, he changed from a person as an elderly gentleman into a man in his 30s. And I don't know why this is. Nobody told me why, but for some reason, we're all in our 30s on the other side. And I don't know if it's because that's when Jesus died. I don't know if it's related to him, but for some reason, we're all young on the other side. So if you die when you're a child, you come back to that age of 30s. Or if you die like this gentleman did, he goes back down to the age of his 30s. So I thought that was fascinating. So anyway, he changed back to where he was, or to his normal age in his 30s. And he stood up and he walked to the right, and he walked in between the columns, and he walked down 3 steps, and he walked into what I call the gardens, because it looked like the most beautiful, ornate gardens you've ever seen. If you've ever seen like English gardens in England, how manicured they are, that's what these gardens looked like. Just absolutely beautiful trees and flowers and the greenest grass I've ever seen. Absolutely emerald green. It was gorgeous. And there were all these people waiting for this man. And I found out that what happens when you cross through the tunnel into the orientation center, after you have your orientation, you have a reunion. And the reunion, you are met by everybody who passed before you. Friends, relatives, loved ones, siblings, everybody's there waiting for you. Plus, all the people you knew already on the other side. They're all waiting for all of us when we get back. And the reason is, it's a really big deal to have a lifetime on Earth because Earth is so hard. And there are many, many souls who don't want to come here for a lifetime because it is so hard. So when we get back, it's a really big deal. It's a huge celebration when you finish a lifetime here. And all these people they were clapping, they were hugging him, people were smiling. It was just a huge joyous occasion. So we all have these reunions when we get back and we meet people that passed before us. So it was a wonderful thing to see. So that was the very first part of my experience. He took me to the orientation center. And something for your audience, if they want to get an idea of what the building looked like, there's a building in Turkey, in the country Turkey, and it's called the Temple of Artemis, Artemis, and it looked very much like the building that I saw in the orientation center. And something I forgot to mention, when my guide was showing me these different places about the other side, he took me to the outside of the building first so I could see what it looked like, so I could describe to listeners what I was seeing. And then he took me to the inside. So this orientation looks like this building in Turkey, called the Temple of Artemis. So that was the first part. The second thing he took me to was a beautiful ornate rectangular building. Again, all these buildings were super huge. And it had, again, the white marble columns all the way around the whole building. And he took me in, and on the inside, I was in a round room, and it looked like a theater. But instead of having just one screen in front, it had a whole bunch of screens up in the top in a circle. And he told me that this is a life review. So and I'm sure a lot of your audience and listeners have heard people talk about this, but we have a life review. Every time we finish a lifetime, we have a life review about how we did in that life. And all of a sudden, all these screens lit up. And every screen that I could see around this big circle had an episode of my life. One was when I was a little toddler. One when I was a student in kindergarten. Another one was playing video of me when I was playing soccer as a little kid. And every screen had a different age, all the way up to the age that I was at the time when I was 21. And I was watching them, and it was like looking at a movie, of a movie screen about my life. And he wanted me to be able to tell people that everything is recorded, and you can have, when you have your life review, you see all these different aspects of your life, and you can see how you did, because we all have reasons for coming into our lifetime: to learn, to grow, to develop. And we have a life review to see how we did. Did we actually accomplish the goals that we set for ourselves? And it's kind of like when people have, at the beginning of every new year, a New Year's resolution. We write our goals down. That's kind of what we do when we plan a lifetime. So in the life review, you just kind of see, okay, did I do what I wanted to do? Did I learn what I set out to learn? Did I experience? So it's just a really amazing way to take account of your life and how you did. And that's called the life review. The next building he took me to looked very similar to this life review building. Again, it was rectangle, square with columns all around. And on the inside was another movie theater, but this one only had one screen in the room. It didn't have the screens around the circle. It was just one screen. And this was the part that was really hard for me to grasp because I was raised Catholic. But they wanted me to tell people this because it's part of what eternity of being alive for eternity really is all about. But we can have many, many lifetimes. We don't have just one life. You can if you want to. It's totally up to you how many lifetimes you want to have. But past lifetimes are real. And this building was where you go to review your past lifetimes. So he took me to this building with one screen, movie screen in front, and he showed me 3 different lifetimes that I had. One was of a monk, and I was at a shaved head. I was wearing a red robe, and it was in a monastery. And my job in that lifetime was to teach kids. That was the first life he showed me. The second life he showed me was I was a shoe peddler, and I had a wheelbarrow, and my job in that community was to fix people's shoes. So I was like a shoe repair person, kind of like. And the third life he showed me was that of a fisherman, and I was on a lake in a boat, a little raggedy old boat with, and I had nets, and my job was I would catch fish for the community that I was in. And he wanted me to be able to tell people that it's really true. We do have past lifetimes, and we learn from them. And it was really hard for me to accept that, because in Catholicism, there's never any talk about that. Nobody ever, there's no such thing as past lifetimes. So that was something that I had to really get used to, but it was extraordinary because it made so much sense that if we are eternal beings, we can have as many lifetimes as we want. And a little bit later, I'll tell you something about the planetarium that they showed me. It was so extraordinary. So that was the past life part. And that was really amazing. The next building he took me to was a round building. And it was in all of these buildings, Maureen, I can't emphasize enough how large these were. They were so large that they fit thousands of people. Nothing I've ever seen on Earth is as large as the buildings that I've seen on the other side. So this one he took me to was it was round, a big round building, and it had marble columns all around the circle, the perimeter, and it had a round dome on top, this huge round dome. And this is the building that we go. Again, I don't know why, but we go to this building when we plan our lifetimes. Every time we want to plan our life, our guide goes with us, and you plan out what you want to accomplish. Well, this building I went into, we went in, and he showed me, again, another marble table, and there were 2 scrolls on this table. One had a red ribbon around it, and the other one had a blue ribbon on it. And they didn't tell me why there were 2 or what the ribbons colors meant. I don't know what any of that meant. So I picked up the one that had a blue ribbon, and I took off the ribbon, and I unfolded the scroll on this table. And it looked like, like ancient Egyptian papyrus. It looked kind of like that. And I opened it up, and I could see that there was black writing all through this document. And it looked like calligraphy. And you remember when you were a kid in school, and you had an ink pen, and you dipped it in the ink, and you wrote down on this paper? That's kind of what this looked like. And I realized that what he wanted me to tell people was that our lifetimes really are planned ahead of time. And you plan the things you want to learn. What do you want to accomplish by that lifetime? What do you want to learn? What do you want to test yourself with? And it's like goals. What kind of goals do you have? And you write them all down. So when I tried to read what was on this scroll, it folded back up. So I wasn't able to see what I'd actually written, because that would invalidate a lot of what I was coming in here to do, to learn. But he wanted me to tell people that our lifetimes are planned, and everybody has a scroll that they plan their lives on. And right about that time, I looked over to my left, and there was this huge window in this building. And I looked out, and this is the first time that I saw other people. And there was a walkway outside of this building, and there were people walking back and forth. It was the place that he took me to on the other side was very busy. There were a lot of people everywhere around here, and people were walking back and forth. And every kind of ethnicity, every race, everybody's there. It's all represented there. And I could see this when people were walking by, and people they were like tunics or robes that are just beautiful, but people also wear whatever they want. I saw people who were in t-shirts and jeans. So you wear whatever you want to wear. And on the other side of this walkway, there was a lake. And it was the most beautiful lake I've ever seen. It was very still, not a ripple in the water. And you know what? Have you ever seen weeping willow trees? And they have those leaves that hang over the trees. Well, all these leaves were sitting in the water. It was absolutely gorgeous. And that's when I realized that the other side is full of nature. There are mountains, there are lakes, there are oceans. Everything that we have here on Earth is also on the other side. So anything you want to do, whether it's ride bikes or swim or write poetry or go to music, go to festivals, all that's there. Everything you love to do on here on Earth, you can also do over there. So anyway, I was watching these people, and he took me to another place in this building, and this what I thought was so hopeful, and I think your listeners will find it hopeful also. I hope so. Have you heard the term soulmate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's a term that we've heard now for many years. Well, soulmates are real, and they are people that are their souls that God created with us to be our eternal love mates on the other side, and they're called soulmates. Well, he took me to this area in this building, and it was huge, again, just absolutely huge, kind of like looking like a library. And have you ever seen Encyclopedia Britannicas? You know what they look like? They're these thick books, and they were kind of maroon. All these books look the same, maroon, like Encyclopedia Britannicas. And instead of having writing going across the horizontally, the writing went down, and it was in gold lettering. And what he wanted me to tell people was that soulmates are real, and everybody has a book in this room. And the lettering goes down from top to the bottom, and it said Nina, 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 and that's my soulmate's name. And all of us have a soulmate. And here's the thing that I thought was really interesting. Many times your soulmate doesn't come with you into a lifetime. And the reason for that is because if you had your soulmate with you in life, you may not learn anything about relationships. What we tend to learn the most from is when we experience something that's hard, something that's difficult. And when you have a breakup with a relationship, you learn so much, and you develop and you grow more. And the reason the soulmate doesn't come with you is because they're your perfect mate. You wouldn't learn anything. Now, I don't know if that's 100% the case for everybody. I'm sure soulmates do come down together, but for the most part, they don't. So that's so you can learn about relationships and learn about the tough times when you have a breakup or you have something. You learn by having relationships. And with learning, a lot of times it has to do with something that's kind of painful. When you go through something, when you get to the other end of it, that's when you realize, oh my gosh, I learned so much from that tough period I went through. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I find so amazing, is that I think God, when he created all of us, he hardwired us to want to learn, to grow, and to develop. And we can still learn on the other side, but it's kind of like trying to explain to somebody what it's like to ride a bike. You can explain it to them, but they don't really know what it's like until they ride a bike for themselves. And that's what it's like when we come into an earth life. We learn by experience. So that was something I thought was just extraordinary about that. We do have soulmates. They don't always come down with us. So if you've never found your soulmate here in life, have absolute hope that when you cross back over and finish this lifetime, you will have that perfect mate. So your audience doesn't have to worry if they never find the person that they love in this life. So that was wonderful. All right. The next thing he took me to looked like, the best way I can describe it is a sports stadium. It was huge, beautiful, like where you play football or soccer or rugby, a huge stadium. Then he took me on the inside, and the inside was this enormous building, kind of like in a circle, maybe more like an oval, and there were thousands of seats in this room. And I was there by myself with my guide, and I was told that this is the planetarium on the other side. And something I found really interesting about this is people have jobs on the other side, but they're not jobs like we have here, that you have to go to a job because you need to have money to pay expenses, you need to have money to pay your rent or your mortgage, or you've got to buy groceries, you have to have money and a job to live. Well, on the other side, it's not like that there. On the other side, you do the work that you love to do, which is usually the kind of gift that God gave you at creation, what you love to do, whether it's writing or painting or acting, or you love numbers, or you love carpentry, whatever it might be. You pursue what you love. Now, you have all kinds of talents on the other side, but a lot of times you do pursue that God-given gift that you were created to do. So there was a gentleman in this building, and his job was he ran this planetarium. It was kind of like what he loved to do and what his job was on the other side. So he said, let's begin. And let me tell you this too. I didn't actually see him. He was behind me. It was like he ran this whole planetarium. That was kind of what his job was. And he said, let's begin. And all the lights went off, and it was pitch black. And when I was a kid, we used to go to a planetarium in California. That's how I knew what this was. And a planetarium, for your listeners who may not have been to one, it's a building you go into, and on the ceiling, they can show videos of your galaxy or planets or different things about astronomy they can show on the ceiling. And that's what this building was. So he said, let's begin. All the lights go off. It's pitch black. And he said to me, when you look at the stars, this is what you see. And what he meant by that was, at the time of our knowledge here on Earth, our knowledge of astronomy and our level of development, not just me, but humanity in general, he said, when you look at the stars, this is what you see. And he started showing our planets, Jupiter, then Uranus and Neptune and Mars, all of our planets. And then that disappeared. And he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And what he meant was everybody on the other side who actually has more knowledge than people do on Earth. And he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And he started showing me planet after planet. First, there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands and millions of planets. And he said, there's far more life in the universe than you possibly know. And there were two things I learned from that. The first one was that Earth is not the only planet. There are billions of planets in the universe, billions of them. And the second thing I learned was that we can have lifetimes on other planets besides Earth. And here's where they told me that the reason Earth isn't something that a lot of people want to go to is because it's so hard here. They said this is the hardest of all the planets, Earth, because we do have horrible things that happen here. You have people who lose a child, or you have some horrible diagnosis with cancer, whatever it might be. But that's part of the dynamic of why people come here, is to learn through hardship, because that's how we really learn the most. So anyway, all these different planets, and you can have lifetimes on any of them. So that was probably one of my favorite parts about my near-death experience, was that all of these planets, we're not the only ones here on Earth. There are billions of other worlds you can have lifetimes on. So I just love that part. That was probably one of my favorite ones. All right, the next place he took me to, it was a building that looked like, how can I explain it? Kind of like it had marble columns out front. It was a huge, elongated rectangle type of building, but it didn't have the columns on the outside on the sides. It only had the columns in the front. kind of like what our Supreme Court building looks like in Washington. And it has all these stairs, marble stairs leading up to the top. And you walk in, and it was a library. And people have told me that they think what I went to was something I'd never heard before, but they called it the Akashic Records. So that it might be that I don't know. I don't know what it was called. But again, it was as far as you could see. It was this long building with the columns out front. So we walked in, and it was a library, and there were people everywhere. And they had kind of like wooden ornate bookshelves with books. And some of these were maybe 20, 30 feet high. And again, as far down as you could see were these books, these libraries. And I was told that everything you ever wanted to learn about anything, you can go to this library and learn about it. Anything. And there were people there sitting at tables, people were talking, people were reading, all kinds of activity. And on the left-hand side of this library, he took me to the left-hand side, and there are rooms. And the best way I can describe them, they're kind of like in our modern libraries where you have study rooms. They looked kind of like that. They were about the size of someone's master bedroom in their home. And there was a woman sitting in this room, one of the rooms he took me to. She had jet black hair, straight down to her waist. Her back was towards me. She was sitting on a couch, and she had a kind of like a purplish kind of tunic or gown on. And she was watching this video screen. And back in 1987, we had these bulky TVs. You know, they were just huge and they were heavy. Well, what I saw, it looked like what we would say today is a flat screen TV. And it was mounted on a wall, and it was maybe like a 50-inch, 60-inch kind of screen. It was really modern looking. And she was watching something. She was watching a video that took place about 150 years ago. And she was watching a battle that took place between the American Native Americans, and the United States cavalry. And it was a battle. And she was watching something as it happened back then in history. And I thought to myself, how is it possible that she could be watching something that happened 150 to 200 years ago? We didn't have video cameras back then. And my guide said, everything is recorded. And that's when I learned that a person's lifetime, everything that they experience, everything they go through is recorded. And I don't understand even now how that's possible. So it has to be a God thing, because everything in your lifetime is recorded. I have no idea how that's possible, but it is. So this girl, the reason she was watching this, she wanted to learn about that particular era of Earth's history. And on the other side, just like here on Earth, we love to learn new things. We love learning. And on the other side, learning is always taking place. So they have these areas like this. They have all kinds of libraries and these rooms where you can go and you can actually watch real history. So if you wanted to watch like a battle that took place in World War II or any other event, you can go to these rooms to see it. So I thought that was fascinating, because I'm like everybody, I love to learn too. You know, we all like learning. So that was called what I call the library. The next place he took me to was a castle, a medieval castle, and it was absolutely huge castle. And what he told me was that everything that's on Earth that was ever man-made, like castles or pyramids, are on the other side first. So he took me to a castle, and the reason was he wanted to show me that on the other side, not only can you go learn about something about Earth's history, you can actually see it also. So the castles are represented on the other side. So I walk in, and the first thing I noticed was that it was beautiful red carpeting all along the floor of this castle. And immediately I saw on both sides were these life-size paintings of royalty that lived in that castle during that time on history in Earth's history. And they were life-size paintings. And the first one I saw was of a king. I don't know which king it was, but it was like King George, King, whoever it may have been. But they were perfect pictures that showed what they looked like and what they wore during that time in Earth's history. And in front of every one of those pictures was a podium. And on the podium were books. And what these books were, they were books of that person's lifetime, of all the decisions that they made, how they treated their people, were they kind, even conversations were written down in these books. And the reason this place existed, because if you wanted to learn about that period of Earth's history, you can go to this castle, see what the buildings looked like, and you could read about that person's lifetime. So right about then, I looked off to my right, and you know how castles back then, they had those stairways that were kind of like in a circle? There was a woman walking down the stairwell, and she had strawberry blonde hair, and she was wearing kind of a pinkish maroon kind of a gown. And she walked up to me, and this is something to this day I still kick myself for, because I thought, geez, John, how stupid could you have been? She walked up to me and she said, "Can I help you with anything?" You know what I said to her? I said, "No, thanks. I'm just looking." How, what a moron thing to say, because I could have asked this girl anything. Where am I? Who are you? What am I doing? I'm supposed to be having surgery. What is this place? What's going on? So I didn't even think to ask anything about where I was. But she saw me, and here's something that was I wanted to tell your audience is that, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, but you pursue things that you love to do on the other side. And this girl, she was what we would call a historian on the other side. She loved that particular era of Earth's history. And she was I guess what you could call a professor about medieval Europe. So if you had any questions about that time period, you could go talk to her. And every area of life on Earth has these people who love to study that part of Earth's history, and you can learn. So that was something I really thought was interesting, was about the paintings and the person's book about their lifetime. So that. And here's the last part of my near-death experience. My guide took me to, I want to tell your audience something before I forget. This is something that almost made me cry. It was so extraordinary. But all our animals are on the other side. They make the transition just like we do. And my guide showed me two cats that I had growing up. And they were in these beautiful wildflower fields. And that's where they keep them until we get back to the other side to be with them again. So all of our animals, they're not gone from us. God is so good and so loving that he created these beautiful companions for us. So just take that and just think about how much hope there is that you'll get to see all of your animals again, and we all get to see them. So he took me to a field, beautiful wildflower field, and flowers that you just can't imagine how beautiful colors that they were. Rolling hills and grasses, and a slight breeze was blowing in the air. And then my guide left. He just left, and I was standing there. And all of a sudden, a man showed up, and he stood in front of me. And I knew immediately that it was Jesus. He had a white robe on, and he had a golden sash, or like kind of like a golden belt around his waist, and he had gold colored sandals on, and they went up to his calves, laced up to his calves. And he was different than everybody else I saw there. He had so much energy, or so much light coming out of his face, that I couldn't make out any features. So I couldn't see what he looked like. But he spoke to me and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And as soon as he said that, I woke up back in the hospital room. And I asked the surgeon, I said, because everyone was in the room, there's different doctors and nurses, and everybody was looking at me. And I said, "What just happened?" Because I thought he could explain to me what had gone on. Because it wasn't until about a day later that I realized that what I saw was the other side. So I woke up, I said, "What just happened?" And he said, "We lost you. We lost you for 7 minutes." So my whole experience, and this is where I learned that the other side doesn't have time like we do. They don't have time. So they did everything that my guide took me to was in Earth time was 7 minutes. That's how long I was gone. But I want to tell your audience that if there's anything that I learned from my experience, it's the hope that waits for all of us, especially for people who have lost others, who've lost family members, and especially when you've lost children, that nobody is ever really gone. They're just in a different place, that we can't see them until our lifetimes are finished. So the most important thing I want to convey is that don't ever give up. Never give up. Keep fighting. Keep moving through your life and do the best you can, because there's a reason for all of it. And even though we lose people here on the earth, they're not really gone from us. They're on the other side. And when you cross, you'll be reunited with them. So give it your best shot. Give it all you've got while you're here on earth. Do your best, and you'll see everybody again when it's your time to cross over. So that was my experience. That's what I saw.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's you had quite a really cool tour, it sounds like.
I
Sounds
know
like
it was.
Alan really gave you like a really cool tour.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know what's so fascinating about that is he only showed me this was a small part of the other side. The other
Wow.
side is like a planet. It's kind of like the other side is it's kind of like Earth, but it's perfect. There's no wars, there's no hunger, there's no racism, there's no starvation. It's like Earth perfected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing. How long? This is the first question because you were technically dead on Earth for 7 minutes.
correct. Yep.
How long did it feel like you were there?
It felt like I was there for 2 hours.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that when he said 7 minutes, because I thought I was there for hours.
Wow.
Everything he showed me, I thought, oh my gosh, this was so long, but it really wasn't. That was just amazing to me, because I felt like I was there for an hour or two.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. I often hear people talk about how time either doesn't exist or works differently
Yeah.
on the other side, and I
Yeah.
always thought that was so interesting and the implications of what that actually means. Like sometimes I wonder about things like, so does that mean like here, time is moving forward and then there's an end of time and a beginning of time, but there's no end and no beginning of time.
Correct.
So what
Yep.
does that mean like for our time? Like if mind blown.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like our human minds can't grasp what that's like.
Yeah, it's really hard to conceptualize.
And here's something too that you might find interesting is when we lose somebody on Earth, we might not have them for 30 years until we pass. So our experience of time is long, years. But on the other side, when somebody crosses over, they still grieve for us who are left here, but it's different for them. They know that person that they just left will be there in a couple of weeks. And a whole lifetime for them can be 80 years for us, but for them, it's a week or a month. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone else and that idea also came up that like people when you cross over to the other side, you you're like, yeah, I missed them, but I'm going to see them any minute. Like, I'm going to see them
Exactly.
soon, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So it's not the same as for us where we're like, oh, we have to go through so much more life without them, right?
Exactly. And something that you just brought up a good point. When I had my experience, when I got back and realized what had really happened, I went through a horrible, horrible depression for 2 months. And I even thought about suicide because I wanted to go back. I wanted to be there. I could not imagine living the rest of my life knowing what the other side is like. I couldn't see how I was going to do it. But then I realized what they told me, you must tell them there is no death. So I kind of got that in my mind that, okay, they told me what to do, so I'm going to do it for the best of my ability for my lifetime. But it was really hard because I didn't want to be here. Because for us, life is so long. But in reality, it really is short. Life isn't that long, and we don't have that much time while we're here. So that was something that I learned about the whole period of Earth time.
Yeah, totally. And you're right about that. And it feels like time goes faster as you get older too. Like
You know what?
Go by faster and faster.
Why is that? I've noticed that too. It's crazy. I don't know why it happens like that, but it
Good
does.
question. Maybe we get busier. I don't know. I have no idea. But I wanted to ask you as well about because you mentioned that Jesus said there's no death, and I'm really curious. What do you think he meant by that, or how did you interpret that? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah. He wanted me to be able to tell people that when somebody dies on Earth, it's not the end. That here on Earth, this isn't our home. We only come here for a short time to learn. But when we die, that frees our soul. Our soul is what is eternal. So he wanted me to tell people that there is no death. Nobody really dies. And something too that I thought was just really interesting. Sometimes I hear people describe the other side as that we're beings of light. That's not what I saw. Everybody has a body. Everybody has form, just like we do here. Everybody is recognizable. So we have bodies over there. And yeah, and I always thought that was so interesting. But when he said, you must tell them there is no death, he was giving me this task. And he wasn't, it was so weird because he wasn't asking me, because I would have said, no, I want to stay here. I don't want to go back. I want to stay where I am. He didn't give me that option. You must tell them there is no death. So all these years later, I have just tried to share my story with people as much as I can to let them know that when your body dies here on Earth, it's not the end of you. You go back home to the other side for eternity, and you can have lifetimes if you want to, but you don't have to. It's totally up to you.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And it has a lot of implications for our life here, because people always say, oh, you just have one life, just, and then it's kind of like, no, you actually continue on. So,
yes. Yep.
So what you do here also have ramifications, later on. Like it'll always have ramifications. That's like a big deal, right?
Yeah,
it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, okay, here's a good question that came up regarding other planets and other Earths and stuff like that. You mentioned that people can have lifetimes there, right?
Yes.
So my question is twofold. One is it all humans on those other planets, or did God create other creatures? And also, do those other planets look like Earth? Do they have cities? Like, did you get any information about what's the main differences between them?
You know what? I didn't, because the perspective that they gave me in that planetarium, I was looking at the planets as if I were in orbit around them. So I couldn't really see. I could see if there were, because some of the planets were blue and they had water on them like ours, like Earth, but not all of them did. Some of them were just deserts. Some of them were tropical forests, but I wasn't close enough to see any of the cities or habitations. But I do know that not everybody is humanoid, kind of like what we look like. Every planet has other creations that God created. And those planets also have their evolutionary development. So we have lifetimes on those planets, but they're different forms. From what I sensed was that most of us look like we do now, but what we would call, if we were to see them, we would say they look like aliens. But they have heads, arms, hands, kind of like the same structure that we have, but what we would call, like, if you've ever watched Star Trek or Star Wars, different humanoid looking kind of bodies. So not only do we have lifetimes on those, but they're different forms, different bodies. Out of the way we look like right now, Earth is the only planet where we look like we do. All the other planets have different life forms.
Interesting. And are all the spirits, creatures, people, like, have you gotten a sense of, is there anything that, like, what happens to things that are maybe not benevolent, or people who are not necessarily benevolent?
You know what? That's something that I've always been really interested in learning. I can tell you what I know for sure is that God didn't create a hell. There is no hell. So people who commit horrible crimes like Hitler or Mussolini or some of the other people that just committed horrible acts here, everybody goes to the other side. Everybody has to go through a life review, but there are levels to the other side, and there are called lower levels, and the lower levels are for souls that haven't really developed very far, and that's where these souls go to when they cross over, because every lifetime you have, you learn and you develop and you grow and you can graduate to these different levels. Well, people that commit atrocious acts on Earth, they're just lower developed souls. And how it was described to me was that they will congregate in these lower levels. And they also have life reviews to see. And here's something that I don't understand how it works, only that it does. But part of your life review is you can feel what your actions did to other people. So that's how you learn. You learn by understanding how your actions affected others. But there is evil. There are souls who have turned their backs on God. And in God's mercy, in his love for all of us, because he cherishes all of us, he gives everybody ample opportunities to learn and to grow. Nobody is sent to hell because hell doesn't really exist. And there's something that kind of what I've learned for myself is, I think, and this is something that nobody told me this. It's just something that I kind of feel in my heart and soul, that Earth is more like the hell that we read about in the Bible. So many things happen on Earth. You lose a child, you get sick with cancer, somebody passes away from a car accident. Everything happens here. It's really hard here. So I think that Earth is kind of like what we would think of as hell. I know that there's not a place that God created for us that's called hell. And you know how I know that? Because on the other side, you can feel God's love for you. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to not want to stay there. Because coming into an Earth lifetime, we lose our memory of the other side. I don't know how that works. That it does. You have amnesia. And being in a lifetime is kind of like being in a battle or a war, and you're in a foxhole without a radio. You feel cut off. You don't feel God. But on the other side, you can feel God's love for you. It's tangible. You can feel how much he cherishes all of us. So he never created a hell to punish anybody. It just doesn't exist.
What would you make of the idea, or that I've heard, and that I to be honest, I do think this is probably true, that there are people who don't want to be in the presence of God. Yeah. So in that case, they get sent away from the presence of God, in which case that's, I think, when I think of hell, if someone were to ask me, what is hell? I would say it's being away from God, because God is everything good, right?
Exactly.
It would be like saying, yeah, I literally don't want this. And so what do you think of that idea, that concept?
I think that's true. I like to read the Bible a lot, even though I don't subscribe to be necessarily a Christian in terms of all the doctrine. I believe very much in Jesus's life and what he did, but I'm not really a Christian. I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Oh, I was just asking, what do you make of the idea of hell as separation from God, as
Oh,
opposed to like a place that God sends you to?
yeah, I think that's true. I think that's absolutely what happens. I don't know if there was ever what the Bible calls a fall of like a certain angel like Lucifer or Satan. I don't know if that was real. All I know is that evil does exist. And just like you said, there are people who turn their backs on God, and they have done that. And they reside on the lower levels. But God gives everybody multiple chances.
Yeah.
And Maureen, I wish I could describe what it feels like to be on the other side, because you can feel God, and it's the most extraordinary, wonderful feeling of that kind of love. It's like the love for your kids.
Yeah.
If you have kids, and as a parent, you would never send your kid to hell because they made a mistake. You give them as many chances as they need to learn and to grow and to develop. And that's one of the things that when I came back from my experience was so hard, because I didn't have that feeling of God anymore. And I don't know why we don't feel that here, but we don't. We feel that on the other side. Does that answer?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And just to add on that, I actually wrote down a note when you were talking about that, and it was that the amnesia kind of makes a lot of sense, because I think all humans, um, well, I can't speak for everyone, but I would say most humans
Yeah.
have this kind of inner yearning for spirituality, for God, for connection, for home, which
Oh,
is like
absolutely.
not here.
Absolutely.
And I feel that it almost gets stronger as we age. At least for me personally, I can definitely say that my search for God and for deep, really meaningful spiritual connection, spirituality, and heaven as home where God is.
Yep.
I definitely feel that as I get older and closer to death, it's like you get like you can't wait to go home kind of thing. Even
Absolutely.
though I've never been, at least if I have been there, I don't remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought it was interesting, the idea of the earth amnesia. And I think it goes back to what you were saying of learning. I was speaking with another gentleman, and he was saying that he had to forget because he needed to learn faith. Like, so that
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting idea, that part of it is like, we have to learn. And so we can't come here knowing everything. Right. So
Exactly. Yep.
yeah,
Exactly. Yep. That's
yeah,
absolutely true. Very
yeah. So I
true.
thought it was really cool. And I wanted to ask also about the soulmate. So I know you mentioned that usually we don't come here with our soulmate. So the people who are married or have a spouse, those are not necessarily the soulmates. Is that what you're saying? Not
Correct. Correct.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask. And let me just go through, see what else here. Oh yes, the other question was the woman who was watching the event in history.
Yeah.
Was she watching it like as a movie, like from a third person perspective, or was she watching it as if she was in the battle?
No, the way it was explained to me was that she was just interested in that particular time in Earth's history, because she didn't have a lifetime during that time period. So she was just interested in learning about this particular battle, what it was like for the Native Americans to be hunted by the U.S. cavalry. She was just actually just wanted to learn about that period, and that's
Yeah.
why she was watching it. And I you know what, I don't understand how they choose a particular a point of history. I don't know how that works logistically.
Mhm.
If there are tapes that they put in, or how they actually get that particular point of history to show up. I don't know how that part works,
Mm.
but she just wanted to learn. That's why she was watching it, just to learn.
Cool. So she was watching it like as if she's standing here and it's happening in front of her, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay, okay. Very cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. And it's interesting because you're not the first person to mention that everything is recorded. So
Oh,
I
good.
believe that everything is recorded. But yeah, it's kind of cool because you're like, this is my earth brain thinking, where's the camera? Like,
That's what
where's
I
it
thought. Yeah.
recorded from, you
Yeah.
know?
How could they do that? How can that be recorded? That's exactly what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Um, okay, let's see here. You mentioned already that we have a physical body.
Yep.
Yes. And it's
Yep.
in our 30s.
Yep.
Okay.
You know what? You know the best. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it. You go first.
I was going to say, I don't know what the bodies we have are made of there, but they are more real than our bodies are here. Our bodies on Earth, and this is by design. They age, they get older, they get sick, and they eventually pass away. The body dies. But on the other side, our bodies are perfect. You know how in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, it says we are made in the image and likeness of God. That's really true.
Yeah.
And we have bodies just like our bodies are here on the other side, but they're different. They are, I guess the only way I can describe it is that it's like they're made of concentrated energy, where they're more real than what we have here.
Yeah.
But everybody has a body. They just like I can see you. They look just like you do. They look the same, just like us. But they're not. There's no bones. The bodies don't get old. They don't get sick. They don't die. But they're better than our bodies are here. So that's something that is something else to look forward to, is you have your body back again, your real body.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know I've heard others also mention exactly what you're saying, that because there's no death and no decay on the other side, that
Yes.
that your body, and even when you mentioned the grass and the perfect garden, things don't decay. They don't, there's no brown pieces of whatever dead leaves anywhere. Like everything is alive, right?
Yep, exactly. That's exactly it. Yep.
I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be really exciting to be able to like experience.
I cannot wait to get back. I think about it every single day. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like I didn't see it, but just speaking to people who've had NDEs, and especially people who've seen heaven, I mean, you get excited about the idea of it. Like you get excited about, yeah, just it's just like the yearning that we all have to be at home in this perfect idea of what home should be, what love should be, humanity and
Yes.
God and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Can you still hear your loved ones on the other side?
You know what they explained to me was that there is a veil that separates both worlds. And on the earth plane side of that veil, it's very, very thick. So it's very hard for us. Some people have the ability to hear their guides, but most of us don't. Like I can't hear my guide or anything. But on their side of the veil, it's much thinner. So they can actually tune into us. I don't know how this works, but they can tune into us and see us anytime they want to. So they're much closer to us than we are to them. And here's something else that they told me that I thought was just wonderful. They can hear our prayers. So if we pray to somebody on the other side, or you pray to God, they can hear that. And something that I do that they told me, that they can hear us when we talk to them. So I talk to my father-in-law all the time, especially in the car. You know, I miss him terribly, but I talk to him out loud and they can hear us. I don't know if they can hear us if we talk to them in our minds, but I know they can hear us if we talk to them out loud. So I'm always doing that, especially when I'm driving.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I had an uncle who passed away in November, and is a very important person in my life. And when he passed, like he was somebody who was a spiritual mentor for me for many years, and like a father figure. And I had a dream of him a couple weeks later, but in my dream, he was much younger.
Yeah.
Much younger than I knew him in life ever. So like he looked like, 20s or 30s maybe.
Yeah.
And so my question is there any connection, you think, between dreams and the afterlife, spiritual connection? Is that even possible, or is that just wishful thinking?
Something that happened that was extraordinary for me is after I had my near-death experience, I never had anything else happen until 7 years ago when my father-in-law passed over. And I think this will kind of answer your question. The other side, well, the day that he died, that night, I had a dream. And in the dream, my wife's dad came to me in a vision, and he was young, just like your uncle was to you. And he talked to me. He said, everything was going to be all right. We're all going to be together again. Give it your best shot. In other words, give life your best shot. We're all going to be together again. Not to worry. And at the very end, he said, please tell my family I'm okay. And that's the only thing that I've ever gotten since I had my near-death experience. I never had any other dreams or experiences, but my wife used to keep a dream journal. And I'm absolutely convinced that when a person dreams, oftentimes when they see someone from the other side, someone who's crossed over and speaks to them, I believe that that's real. So I think they can have the ability to talk to us and see us and hear us, that dreams are not always just dreams. A lot of times it's real communication. Hey, if my phone goes dead, it's not because of you. I forgot to charge it.
That's okay. That's okay. We're gonna wrap up so we don't cut out all of a sudden.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Yeah, totally. I think that's beautiful. And maybe the veil is a little bit thinner when you're dreaming or something like that.
I think it has to be. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I'll just ask you one more question.
Sure.
It's kind of a two-part question, which is, what have you learned / what would you want others to know from your experience?
That's a great question. I think I would say, first of all, that there are really two reasons why we come here to this planet. The first one is to complete the types of things we set for ourselves, the goals that we have for ourselves, what you want to learn, what types of trials did you go through, what did you set for yourself to experience and to learn. So the number one thing is to come in to learn and to experience and to grow. And the second reason we come here is to make other people's journeys more bearable. In other words, to help people as much as you can. There's a wonderful quote that I remember from the Dalai Lama. And he said that our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. So I think those are the reasons why we're here, to learn, number one, and number two, to try to help make a difference in the lives of others.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Jesus said: love God, love others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, when I was in that field and Jesus was standing there, I had the sense that he is your very best friend, the best friend you could ever have. It was just an incredible feeling.
That's awesome. I can't wait to meet him face to face.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you so much, John. I'm not going to hold you up. I know that your phone is about to die, so we don't want to hold you up. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your incredible account.
Thank you for inviting me on your show. I had a great time. You're really good at this, so thank you.
I really appreciate all the wisdom that you shared, all the intimate details and everything. And I just hope you have a really great weekend, and we'll keep in touch.
You too. Thank you so much, Maureen. Talk to you later.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. And if you have an NDE that you'd like to share, you can email us at travelsinthespirit@gmail.com. God bless.